Tonight, President Clinton makes an unexpected and unprecedented encore appearance in the White House briefing room to push the Obama tax cut deal.
I am happy to be here, I suppose, when the bullets that are fired are unlikely to hit me.
I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, an infamous kidnapping case.
I'm so thrilled with the verdict.
Ryan David Mitchell is convicted in the abduction of Elizabeth Smart. How did this happen? British security under fire after protesters attack Prince Charles's car. And scoring a piece of history, the birth certificate of basketball.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. If you were channel surfing this afternoon, you might have done a double take when you saw the President of the United States in the White House briefing room. It was the 42nd President, Bill Clinton, taking questions from reporters. The 44th, Barack Obama, called in the biggest gun he could to help persuade congressional Democrats to go along with the tax cut compromise. And the stakes couldn't be higher. In just 3 weeks, the Bush tax cuts are due to expire for everyone. 2 million of the long-term unemployed could lose their jobless benefits, and the budget deficit is soaring. The Treasury reported today the deficit hit a monthly record in November, more than $150 billion, adding to a national debt now closing in on $14 trillion. Chip Reid is at the White House tonight. And Chip, it was a very unusual scene there today, to say the least.
Well, Katie, we had been told by White House officials that absolutely this was a private meeting. We wouldn't even be getting a piece of paper describing how the meeting went. But to the surprise of everyone in the press corps, on a moment's notice, everything changed.
I thought it was a slow news day, so I'd bring the other guy in.
After more than an hour in the Oval Office, the current and former presidents made a surprise visit to the briefing room.
Given the fact that he presided over as good an economy as we've seen in our lifetimes, that it might be useful for him to share some of his thoughts.
The president spoke for barely a minute, doing little more than introducing the former president, then turned it over to Mr. Clinton to defend the president's tax deal with Republicans.
The agreement taken as a whole is, I believe, the best bipartisan agreement we can reach to help the largest number of Americans and to maximize the chances that the economic recovery will accelerate and create more jobs.
Then the president stunned everyone by announcing he was leaving for a holiday party.
Here's what I'll say is I've been keeping the First Lady waiting for about half an hour, so I'm going to take off.
But, I don't want to make her mad. Please go.
You're in good hands, and Gibbs will call last question.
Yeah, help me. Thank you.
That left the former president to do the talking, and talk he did for more than half an hour in all. He explained at length why he thinks a compromise on taxes was necessary.
Look, if we had 5% growth and unemployment was dropping like a rock, maybe you could have a so-called Mexican standoff, and you could say, it'll be you, not me. The voters will hold responsible for raising taxes on middle-class people if they all go down, next year. That is not the circumstance we face.
And he argued that the private sector is sitting on enough money to save the economy.
The money is there to get this country out of this mess. $2 trillion in the bank is $20 trillion in loans. Ask them to be honest with us about what would it take to get you back in the investment business.
As the president requested, Press Secretary Robert Gibbs called last question repeatedly. But Mr. Clinton was back in his White House groove and ignored Gibbs, calling on reporters again and again and again. He opined on the state of the economy.
The United States has suffered a severe financial collapse. These things take longer to get over than normal recessions.
He praised bipartisanship.
And I think it is enormous relief for America to think that both parties might vote for something, anything that they could both agree on.
And he recalled how much he liked being president.
Oh, I had quite a good time governing. I am happy to be here, I suppose, when the bullets that are fired are unlikely to hit me, unless they're just ricocheting.
And the House and the Senate are expected to vote on the tax package next week, Katie, so we'll see if this had the intended effect.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because I know CBS Radio White House correspondent Mark Knoller, Chip, he's the unofficial White House historian. He tells us this is the first time Bill Clinton has been in the briefing room since he was president. So do you think he did change any minds? Is it too soon to tell?
Well, we tried to find that out, Katie. We called a whole bunch of offices on Capitol Hill and talked to advisors, and virtually all of them said, while my boss is traveling, he didn't get to see it, which makes you wonder why this extraordinary event was buried on a Friday evening.
I'm sure they'll be hearing about it this weekend, though. Chip Reid at the White House. Chip, thank you. Now to a kidnapping case that gripped the entire nation on a quiet night in the summer of 2002. 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was abducted in her own bedroom. She was rescued 9 months later. And today, a federal jury in Salt Lake City convicted Brian David Mitchell of kidnapping and transporting a minor across state lines. John Blackstone has more now on the verdict.
More than 8 years after she was kidnapped at knife point, Elizabeth Smart, now 23, walked out of the federal courthouse with a victory she and her family had long desired, a guilty verdict for her kidnapper.
Today is a wonderful day, and I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so thrilled with the verdict.
It's real.
Doesn't she glow?
Elizabeth had been the star witness in the trial of 57-year-old Brian Mitchell, the drifter who had claimed that God told him to take the then 14-year-old girl as one of his wives. On the stand, she said Mitchell rapes her virtually every day during her 9-month captivity.
I'm so thrilled to stand before the people of America today and give hope to other victims who have not spoken out about their crime, about what's happened to them.
Defense attorneys admitted Mitchell had committed the crimes against Smart, but they claimed he was mentally ill, delusional, convinced that he was acting on orders directly from God. Whenever he entered the courtroom during the 4-week trial, Mitchell sang hymns loudly and was routinely ordered out of the courtroom. Prosecutors called it an act.
One of the witnesses called it a switch, flipped it on, flipped it off.
And jurors were clearly touched by Smart's testimony.
Elizabeth Smart, I think she's a wonderful, capable, very intelligent person.
I'm a soft old man with children. You've got to be pretty callous to be able to walk away without having something tug at your heart.
Mitchell was arrested and Elizabeth freed in March 2003, but his trial in state court ended abruptly when a judge declared him incompetent to stand trial. Federal prosecutors later picked up the case, and Elizabeth flew back from her Mormon mission in France to testify. She's now eager to restart a normal life.
I am excited to go back to France and complete my mission. Thank you to everyone for everyone's prayers and support.
Mitchell's wife and co-conspirator in this case has already been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Mitchell will return to this court on May 25th for sentencing. Katie?
John Blackstone reporting from Salt Lake City tonight. Thank you, John. Meanwhile, in London, it was an embarrassing security lapse. Last night, students protesting tuition increases attacked a car carrying Prince Charles and his wife Camilla to a concert. Today, Elizabeth Palmer reports officials promised a thorough investigation.
First came the police escort. And then the prince's Rolls Royce. At first, the protesters seemed amused.
Hi, Charles, how you doing, mate?
Then things got ugly.
Scum! Off with their heads! Off with their heads!
A mob shouting "off with their heads" smashed a window, kicked the car, and threw paint until police fended them off.
Our streets! 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 Fucking Tory scum!
The couple reached the theatre unharmed, but shocked and shaken.
If Camilla had got out of the car, say 2 minutes later, she would have been covered, in paint. It could have been possibly the picture of the century. But how sort of catastrophic would that be for the image of our royal family?
So how did it happen? The royal car usually follows smaller side roads from Prince Charles's residence to the theatre district. But last night it took main roads and ran right into the protesters.
There was literally hundreds of us. They should have seen the cars and taken them enough direction.
But the mob wasn't rioting when a police reconnaissance team checked the route, says London's police chief.
I won't go into the detail of security operations. That route was thoroughly recce'd in advance, including up to several minutes beforehand when the route was still clear.
Britain's royals have been targeted before. A youth shot blanks at the Queen in 1981. And in 1994, a man fired a starter's pistol at Prince Charles. But neither incident changed the family's deliberately open, accessible style.
They like to be seen by their public, and to lock them up into armoured vehicles every day of their life was something that they wouldn't want.
The royal family and the police know they had a close call last night, and they're determined it won't happen again. There's now an urgent security review underway, especially as Prince William's royal wedding is planned for April. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, London.
In Oslo, Norway, there was a special poignancy to today's Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. For the first time in 75 years, there was no one there to accept the award. The winner, Chinese dissident Liu Xiaobo, is in prison back home, so the award was placed in an empty chair. The head of the prize committee implored China to release Liu, but that won't happen anytime soon, as Celia Hatton in Beijing reports.
Chinese leaders call Liu Xiaobo a criminal plotting to overthrow the state. But outside China, the Nobel Peace Prize winner is a respected human rights activist. Liu helped coordinate 1989's Tiananmen Square demonstrations. Then, 2 years ago, he co-wrote Charter 08, a petition calling for multi-party democracy in China. For that, he's serving 11 years in a Chinese jail cell for state subversion.
What he did that was different was not simply to talk about political reform, but to try to organize a resistance.
Liu's wife, Liu Xia, is also paying a heavy price for her husband's work. She's under strict house arrest. CBS News was barred from going near her apartment.
Liu Xiaobo and Liu Xia are well known, but thousands of other political prisoners in China remain hidden from the spotlight. Those deemed enemies of the state endure house arrests, face secret trials and lengthy prison sentences, or they simply disappear.
Gao Zhisheng, a self-taught lawyer who fought government corruption, was kidnapped by security forces in 2009. There were over 100 police always watching our house. Our home was like a prison, Gao's wife says. His family then fled to the U.S. Gao briefly resurfaced in March before being abducted again. Many now fear he's dead. Another activist, Feng Zhenghu, is paying a heavy price for his battle against state corruption. Feng spent over 3 months inside Tokyo's Narita airport when Chinese authorities banned him from boarding a plane home. When Beijing finally relented, Feng was placed under house arrest in Shanghai. He describes being guarded 24/7 as mental torture. I could be jailed at any time using any excuse, he explains. Police regularly break Feng's mobile phone data chips and illegally seize his computer equipment. But Feng's biggest worry? His family's safety. I have buried my love for my family deep, deep down, he says. I can't show it because the agents I deal with are very cruel. If they detect your weakness, they will hit it hard. China's history of dissent is a long one. From his prison cell, Liu Xiaobo dedicated the Nobel he won today to the tank man and other Tiananmen protesters. And that's encouraging to many in China who want the global spotlight shined once again on the country's lack of political freedom. Celia Hatton, CBS News, Beijing.
Like China, Iran has come under fire for its human rights record. There's been an international outcry since Iran sentenced a woman to death by stoning for committing adultery. Today, the woman, a 43-year-old mother of 2, was shown on state-run TV, apparently confessing to helping her lover kill her husband. She even reenacted the murder, demonstrating how she gave her husband an injection and later assisted as he was electrocuted. It is unclear if that confession was coerced, but Iranian authorities could use it to justify executing the woman by hanging instead of stoning. And coming up later here on the CBS Evening News, traveling back in basketball history to the man who invented it. But up next, we'll hear from passengers on that Antarctic cruise just back from one very rough ride. It was an Antarctic voyage promising views of icebergs and wildlife, but it turned out to be no pleasure cruise for the American passengers. For one 24-hour period, the ship was slammed by high winds and towering waves. Today, Erin Moriarty reports they finally made it back to port in Argentina and told their stories.
The 290-foot, 4,000-ton cruise ship was tossed like a toy in the dangerous waters off the southern tip of South America. On Tuesday, a 45-foot wave shattered a window on the bridge of the Clelia II, knocking out communications and radar and forcing the captain to declare an emergency.
We're boaters, but I've never seen anything like this before.
The coffee pots and everything was flying around, and so they asked us to go to our cabins, which we did.
The 88 Americans on board, many of them retirees, were confined to their quarters while another cruise ship, the National Geographic Explorer, sailed to the rescue. Braving the same rough seas, the Explorer crew hovered close by and in a daring effort shot a line to the crippled ship and used it to send a working satellite phone.
It was really rough, and the boat was rocking and people were falling over. It was really hard to walk, so it was really bouncy.
After the waters calmed, the Clelia II, which never lost complete engine power, limped back to port, where the passengers seemed remarkably calm about the 24-hour ordeal.
It was pretty exciting. I got my money's worth.
None of the passengers, who paid $9,000 apiece, was injured, but they may have been lucky. The voyage took them through the notorious Drake Passage, an area that sailors say is one of the most treacherous in the world. Erin Moriarty, CBS News, New York.
Looks terrifying. From the high seas to the skies now, there are 357,000 aircraft in this country, but the FAA is missing the proper ownership documents on about a third of them, mostly private planes. And that could make it easier for terrorists or drug traffickers to buy planes that can't be tracked. The agency says it's going to require every aircraft to be re-registered over the next 3 years. And still ahead, the secret behind space-aged cheese. President Obama's special envoy to Afghanistan and Pakistan is in the hospital tonight. Richard Holbrooke, who is 69, became ill this afternoon at the State Department and was taken away by ambulance. No word yet on his condition. Former tennis great Martina Navratilova is in a hospital in Kenya. She came down with a form of high-altitude sickness as she was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Navratilova is 54 and is expected to make a full recovery. Earlier this week, a rocket blasted off into space on a test flight, and today we learned it was carrying some secret cargo. The privately owned Falcon 9 roared off the launch pad at Cape Canaveral Wednesday, sending an unmanned capsule into orbit. Unmanned but not empty, the capsule splashed down in the Pacific. And inside, a wheel of cheese. Why?
Come again. I want to buy some cheese.
Apparently, it was a fromage homage to an old Monty Python skit. And coming up next, remembering when basketball was 2 words and there was no dribbling, the original rules of the game. Finally tonight, 2 weeks before Christmas, some people went shopping today for a piece of the past. Anthony Mason has the story.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
3 remarkable artifacts of American history were sold at Sotheby's today.
Really all 3 of these items coming up today are icons.
The first,
the Kennedy-Lincoln Emancipation Proclamation,
was the document signed by Lincoln that freed the slaves in 1863.
And I also collect things having to do with American history.
Bought by Robert F. Kennedy in 1964 for $9,500. It sold to an anonymous buyer today for more than $3.7 million.
Our next sale is Custer's last flag.
General George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry all died at the Battle of Little Bighorn, but this flag survived. It sold for $2.2 million. But the last item up for sale would bring the highest price, 2 pieces of paper.
And to think that without those 2 pages, there would be no game of basketball.
The 2 typed pages on which James Naismith laid out the rules of his new game in 1891.
Where had the rules been kept all these years?
Oh gosh, see, my grandfather had them in a desk drawer,
till 1939.
After more than a century in the family, Jan Naismith was selling them to raise money for the family charity.
And on my left, $3,800,000.
When the gavel came down, they set a record for sports memorabilia, more than $4,300,000. The buyer, fans of Kansas University, where Naismith was the first basketball coach.
He read about the rules being auctioned off, and he came up with this idea.
Lauren Swade's husband, Josh, made it his mission to bring the rules to the school.
And so he didn't have a whole lot of time to try and meet people and raise the money, and believe it or not, he did it.
He persuaded David Booth, a mutual fund CEO and Kansas alumnus, and his wife Suzanne to bid.
Turns out to be a pretty good Christmas present.
Yeah, to KU, yeah.
Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching this week. Russ Mitchell will be here tomorrow, and I'll see you again on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend. And for the latest news online, you can check out cbsnews.com. Good night.